In the village of Umweze, where the red dust of Harmattan painted everything in hues of memory and decay, there was no name spoken with more reverence than that of Esther Nwosu.
She was the wife of elder Silas Nwosu, a man who had, in his youth, amassed a fortune from cocoa and palm oil so vast that his very name was a byword for wealth. Now, at 72, he was a shrunken thing, a whisper of a man who spent his days in a rattan chair on the veranda, his liver-spotted hands trembling as they reached for a cup of water.
Esther was 34. The village had long memories. They remembered the scandal of the marriage, a fresh, vibrant flower plucked and offered to a withering tree.
But they also remembered the miracle of it. Esther had walked down the aisle in a gown of pure white, her gaze cast humbly downward,
And had vowed before God and man to love, cherish, and care for the man who had paid her father's debts and secured her brother's futures. In the years that followed, she became a pillar of the Women's Fellowship, the first to arrive at church cleanings, the organizer of widows' alms, the woman who always had a scripture verse for every village gossip. She was Odoziani, the good wife, the virtuous woman.
Her home was a haven of order. Her prayers, which could be heard rising from her prayer closet each dawn, were the stuff of pastoral legend. But a watcher, a very quiet, very patient watcher, might have noticed the thinness of her smile when she placed a bowl of bitter leaf soup before her husband. They might have seen the way her eyes, the color of cold, wet stones, would follow the young men who passed by their compound. They might have glimpsed, for a fleeting second, the contempt that flickered across her face when Elder Silas's spoon clattered to the floor, his fingers too weak to hold it.
"Ah, my husband," she would coo, dabbing at his chin with a handkerchief that smelled of her perfume, a scent too bold. "See how you trouble yourself. Let me help you.
You are too kind, my child.
Rest now. I am here."
The villagers would nod, their hearts swelling.
What a blessing.
That one.
What they did not see was that each morning, before the roosters crowed their final call, Esther would stand by the pot of his akamu, the pop he took to settle his stomach,
And stir in a pale, odorless powder. It was not enough to kill, not yet. It was a patient poison, one that mimicked the creeping frailty of age. A little more weakness in the legs, a little more clouding of the mind, a little more of the tremors that made him seem so pitifully ancient. She would watch him drink it, her face a mask of serene concern, while her mind was elsewhere. It was on the strong, muscled arms of Namdi, the young man who repaired her leaking roof. It was on the confident laughter of Chibaik, the motorcycle mechanic who always seemed to have a flat tire just outside her gate. It was on the dimpled smile of the itinerant preacher, Brother Ugo, who came for Bible study when Silas was deep in his afternoon stupor.
The old man's weakness was her liberation, and she cultivated it with the same meticulous care she applied to her church bouquets. The young men were a game, a thrill, a balm to the years she had sold. But the true prize, the one that glittered in her dreams, was the inheritance.
The land, the houses, the investments, all of it would soon be hers. Then she would be truly free. She would be young, wealthy, and untethered.
As she sat by Silas's side that evening, a Bible open on her lap, her hand resting on his cold, still one, she looked every bit the devoted wife. She read aloud from Proverbs 31, her voice a honeyed drawl.
She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She paused, looking down at her husband's slack, sleeping face. She watched his chest rise and fall with a labored, rasping breath. A slow, small smile touched her lips, a smile that held no kindness, no wisdom.
It was the smile of a woman who was checking the knots on a parcel, waiting for the moment it would finally be hers to unwrap. Sleep well, my husband. Soon you will have your rest.
And somewhere in the compound, a nightjar began its mournful cry, a sound the old women of Umweze said was an omen of a coming end.
But Esther heard only the sweet music of her own future, drawing ever closer.
The young men came and went like shadows, each believing himself to be the singular object of her suppressed desire. There was a schedule, unspoken but precise.
Namdi, the roofer, came on Mondays when the churchwomen had their fellowship meeting. Chibike, the mechanic, arrived on Wednesdays, ostensibly to check the old man's unused car. Brother Ugo, the preacher, appeared on Fridays for evening prayers, often staying until the mosquitoes grew thick and the compound fell silent. On this particular Wednesday, the rains had come early, turning the red earth to slick clay
and sending a cool breeze through the open windows of the main house. Esther had dressed in a simple wrapper and blouse, her hair wrapped in a bright yellow scarf, looking every inch the humble farmer's wife. She knelt in the garden, her fingers deep in the soil, when she heard the familiar sputter of a motorcycle. She did not look up immediately.
Let him see her first. Let him watch the way her back arched as she pulled a weed, the way the damp earth clung to her fingers. She had perfected the art of being observed.
Mama Esther, good afternoon. Chibike's voice was young, eager, slightly breathless.
She rose slowly, wiping her hands on her wrapper, and offered him a smile that was both maternal and something else entirely.
Ah, Chibike, you came. The old car has been making that sound again. You know how my husband worries.
Chibike was 25, with a boxer's build and the smooth, unlined face of a boy who had not yet learned that life could be cruel. He stepped closer, his eyes scanning the compound. The old man was dozing on the veranda, his chin on his chest, a fly resting on his knee. The house girl.
He does not look like he worries about anything.
Ifeoma had been sent to the market 2 hours ago and would not return until sunset.
He does not look like he worries about anything.
Ifeoma had been sent to the market 2 hours ago and would not return until sunset.
Patience. Everything is moving as it should.
Soon, there will be no more waiting. I am tired of waiting, Esther. Tired of hiding.
Tired of seeing you pour his medicine, wipe his mouth, play the good wife.
The good wife is the one who gets everything in the end. Do you understand? Everything. And then we will have nothing to hide from.
He followed, his footsteps silent on the wet earth. Inside the cottage, the door clicked shut. And the afternoon dissolved into a tangle of limbs and stifled sounds, the rain pattering against the iron roof a merciful accomplice. But secrets, like termites, eat away at foundations unseen. Mama Chidinma, the oldest woman in the village, lived in a small hut just opposite the Nwosu compound. Her eyes were clouded with cataracts, and her legs were bowed from decades of pounding cassava, but her hearing was sharp as a machete. She had heard the sputter of the motorcycle.
She had heard the sputter of the motorcycle.
She had heard the silence that followed.
And she had heard, from her seat on the guest cottage for Cree.
She did not mention it to anyone, not yet. But she sat a little straighter, her gnarled fingers were lid her sneehusbox, and in a dozen secrets. Inside the main house, Elder Silas stirred in his chair. The afternoon light slanted across his face, illuminating the deep hollows of his cheeks and the yellow tinge that had begun to color the whites of his eyes. He tried to lift his hand to scratch his nose, but the limb responded sluggishly, as if weighted with stones. His mind, once sharp to now swaggled around through the thick fog. He had been a strong man once. He remembered it, the feel of a hammer in his grip, the weight of a bag of cocoa on his shoulder, the authority in his voice that made men half his age tremble. Now he could not lift a spoon. Now his voice came out as a croak. He was dependent on the very woman who had, he once believed, been his second wind.
Esther?
The word died on his lips. He listened. The house was silent, too silent.
The rain had stopped, and the only sound was the distant murmur of the village going about its business. He turned his head, a movement that took several seconds passed, and he looked toward the veranda railing. His aunting. The least glad of red clay, but from the direct paints college. His brow furrowed. He tried to piece it together, but the fog swallowed the thought before it could form. His eyelids grew heavy. The spoon of akamu she had given him that morning sat
Heavier than usual in his stomach, and a dull ache had settled in his bones, not the familiar ache of age, but something deeper, something that felt like cold water seeping into his marrow.
Biko, biarieri, odimanke uku.
He saw her face, kind, uncomplicated, but plain.
When he opened his eyes again, the sun had shifted, and Esther was there, standing over him. Her hair was freshly wrapped, her blouse changed, and she smelled of the gardenia soap she kept for afternoons.
You slept well, my husband?
Yes, very well.
He looked at her face, so composed, so benevolent, and for the first time he saw something behind her eyes that made a cold thread of fear weave through his chest. It was not love.
Esther, I want to see my lawyer.
The smile did not waver. If anything, it softened, became almost pity. So you are too weak for Vistja. Rest now. I will make you your evening pap.
She turned and walked into the house, her wrapper whispering against the floor. Behind her, Silas's trembling hand clenched into a fist on the armrest, a fist that could not close, a strength that no longer existed. He stared at the smear of red clay on the floor, then at the closed door of the guest cottage, and the fog in his mind began to clear just enough for a terrible certainty to take root.
He was not ill. He was being killed. And the saint of Umweze, the woman the whole village called a blessing, was the one holding the cup.
And the afternoon dissolved into a tangle of limbs and stifled sounds, the rain pattering against the iron roof, a merciful accomplice.
I need to call my lawyer.
The request for his lawyer had been a flicker, a dying ember trying to catch wind. But Esther was too skilled a keeper of the hearth to let it spark.
She brought him his evening pap with her own hands, sitting beside him, feeding him spoonful by spoonful, humming a hymn.
By the time the bowl was empty, his eyes had grown glassy again, and the name of his lawyer had slipped from his mind like water through fingers. But Silas Nwosu had not built his fortune by being a fool. The fog came and went, and in its clearer moments, he began to watch. He watched the way Ifeoma, the housegirl, avoided his eyes. He watched the way Esther's wrapper would sometimes be tied differently in the evening than it had been in the morning. He watched the calendar on the wall, a gift from the parish, and noted how many days had passed since he had last been able to walk unassisted to the bathroom.
The decline was not natural. He had seen death by age before. It crept. This was a gallop.
The poison's grip loosened slightly overnight, and for an hour, perhaps two, his mind was almost his own. It was during one such hour that he made his move.
The housegirl, Ifeoma, was a shy girl of 17, sent from her village to work for the Nwosus as payment for a debt her father owed. She slept in a small room off the kitchen and was usually the first to rise. Silas lit the charcoal fire and swept the compound before Esther descended from her bedroom. On this morning, Silas had willed himself out of his chair. It took him 10 minutes to stand, another 10 to shuffle to the kitchen doorway, his legs screaming with every inch. Ifeoma was crouched by the fire, blowing life into the coals. She looked up, and her eyes widened with alarm.
Papa Mosu, you should not be out of bed. Mama Esther will...
Wow, Lusnomi, listen to me.
Papa, what is it? There is something you must know.
When you go to the market today, you must find Barrister Okonkwo. His office is opposite the post office. Tell him Silas Nwosu says he is dying and it is not God's work. Tell him to come. You understand? Tell no one else, especially not her.
She had seen the way her madam looked at the old land man, the same way she looked at a goat she was fattening for Christmas. But she had also seen the way the whole village revered Esther.
Papa, I cannot.
She stammered.
You will.
he said, and though his body was weak, his voice carried an echo of the man he had once been.
Or I will ensure your father's debt follows you for the rest of your life. Do this, and I will tear up the paper myself. You have my word.
Ifioma swallowed. She nodded once, a quick, jerky motion, just as the sound of Esther's footsteps echoed from the main house. Silas moved with agonizing slowness back to his chair, collapsing into it just as Esther entered the kitchen. She glanced at him, then at Ifioma, her eyes narrowing almost imperceptibly.
You are awake early, my husband.
Could not sleep. The pain in my belly.
Go to the market. Get the things on my list. Do not be late.
Ifioma took the list with trembling hands and fled. But Esther was not a woman who had survived 8 years of deception by being careless.
She had noticed the way Ifioma's eyes had darted from the old man to the floor. She had noticed the whispered words she could not quite hear. And she had long ago learned that the greatest threat to a secret was not the one who knew it, but the one who might speak it to the wrong ears.
She waited until Ifioma had left the compound. Then she went to the girl's small room behind the kitchen. It took her only minutes to find what she was looking for.
A small cloth pouch hidden beneath the mattress, containing a few coins, a faded photograph of the girl's family, and a folded paper, the promissory note for her father's debt.
Esther smiled. She took the note, slipped it into her wrapper, and left everything else untouched. When Ifioma returned from the market, her arms laden with tomatoes and dried fish, Esther was waiting for her in the kitchen. The smile on her face was the same one she wore at church functions, warm, benevolent, utterly terrifying.
I have been thinking about you. You work so hard, you never complain. You are like a daughter to me.
Thank you. That means so much.
The girl said nothing, her heart hammering. Esther reached into her wrapper and produced the promissory note. Ifioma's face drained of color. I found this in your room. Were you planning to steal it? To run away? After everything we have done for you? No, madam, I was not. Shh. I know you are a good girl. But you must also be a loyal girl. Loyal to me. Do you understand what I am saying?
Ifioma nodded, tears streaming down her face.
Good. Your father's debt is paid.
You are free, but freedom has a cost. If I ever hear that you have spoken a word about anything that happens in this compound, anything at all, I will tell the village that you stole from me.
I will tell them you poisoned the old man for his money. They will believe me. They always believe me. Now, did my husband say anything to you this morning? Ifioma shook her head, her whole body trembling.
Good girl. Now go prepare his afternoon pap. I will show you how I like it made.
That evening, as the sun bled orange and red across the sky, Barrister Okonkwo sat in his office across town, shuffling papers. That evening, as the sun bled orange and red across the sky, Barrister Okonkwo sat in his office across town, shuffling papers.
He had been expecting a call from Elder Silas Mosu for some weeks now. The old man had mentioned wanting to update his will, but the call had never come. He assumed the elder's health had declined further. A pity, he thought. The man had been a titan. Now, if the rumors were true,
He was little more than a ghost in a chair, tended by that devoted young wife. He made a mental note to send a condolence card when the time came. It was only a matter of time, after all.
in the Nwosu compound, the evening meal was served.
Here you are, Silas. Just a little more.
It's very good. Thank you.
Her movements gentle, her voice a soothing murmur. The old man's eyes were open, but they saw nothing. The poison had done its work well. He could no longer form words, could no longer lift his hand. He was aware, dimly, of the woman's face above him, of the spoon against his lips, of the slow, inexorable closing of the walls.
There, she said, setting the empty bowl aside. She wiped his chin with the handkerchief, the one that smelled of gardenia and something else.
You rest now, my husband. Everything is taken care of. She could see the lights of Mama Chidinma's hut across the road, the old woman's silhouette visible in the doorway. For a moment, their eyes seemed to meet across the darkness.
But then Mama Chidinma turned and went inside, and the moment passed.
The lawyer would not come. The house girl was silenced. The old man was a vegetable.
In a week, perhaps 2, he would be a corpse. And then, the inheritance, the land, the money, the freedom. She closed her eyes and let herself imagine it. A new life in the city, a flat with modern furniture, the young men lined up at her door, no more pretending, no more pap, no more ancient, trembling hands reaching for her.
She opened her eyes and looked up at the stars. They were bright and cold and distant, and she had won. What she knew, what she had been forbidden to speak. The torn promissory note lay in pieces at the bottom of her pocket. The broom moved across the veranda, pushing aside the fine red dust that settled overnight. It was when she swept near the old man's chair that she stopped. Her eyes caught something on the wooden armrest, faint, shallow grooves, like the scratching of a dying insect. She knelt, her heart already pounding, and traced them with her finger.
It was not writing, not really. There were no words, no letters that formed a proper sentence. But there was a shape, a cross.
And beneath it a single character scratched over and over until the wood had splintered slightly. An E. Ifioma stared at it, and the morning air grew cold around her. She looked at the old man, slumped in his chair, his chest rising and falling with a sound like dry leaves rattling. His eyes were closed, but his right hand, the one that had held the pen, was stretched out toward the armrest, the fingers curled as if they had only just let go.
He had been trying to write. He had been trying to name her.
She understood.
She had to tell someone. She had to... Good morning, Ifioma.
Ifioma spun around. Esther stood in the doorway of the main house, wrapped in a burgundy bathrobe, her hair loose around her shoulders. Her eyes were fixed on the girl's face, reading it like a ledger.
You are up early. Have you had your morning tea? I was just sweeping, madam.
Esther's gaze drifted past her to the old man's chair. Ifioma saw her eyes catch on the armrest, and then the smiling of her jaw.
You work so hard. But you missed a spot. Look here, under Papa's chair. So much dust. Sweep it properly, will you? I will go prepare his morning pass right away. There now, all cozy.
Thing in her hand, a small cloth she tucked into her pocket. She walked into the house without looking back.
Ifioma stood frozen for a long moment. Then, her legs trembling, she approached the chair.
The way the old man, who had been frail but alert 6 months ago, was now a breathing corpse, the housegirl's terror, and this morning's business with the chair, which she had witnessed from her doorway.
She is rubbing something out. A man who cannot speak does not leave messages for no reason. Something is happening in that compound, and it is not the will of God.
These are heavy accusations, Mama. The woman is respected. The pastor himself speaks of her as a model of Christian womanhood.
The pastor, Mama Chidima said, spitting into the dust, sees what she shows him.
I see what she hides. Are you a man or a mouse, Oga Okafo? Will you wait until the old man is dead and buried before you ask questions?
Okafo was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly.
I will speak to the elders, quietly. We will send someone to the hospital in the city, someone she does not know, to ask about the symptoms. If there is poison involved,
The doctors will know what to look for quickly.
the old man does not have much time.
That afternoon, while Esther was in the garden directing Namdi, who had come to fix a leak in the guest cottage roof. A man in a plain brown agbada walked past the Nwosu compound. He was a stranger, a distant cousin of one of the elders, passing through on his way to the city. Or so he claimed. He stopped at the gate, called out a greeting, and asked for a cup of water.
Thank you.
He noted the old man in the chair, the yellow tinge in his eyes, the unnatural stillness. He noted the woman in the garden, laughing at something the young roofer said, her hand resting on his arm.
He noted the fear in the housegirl's eyes, the way she glanced over her shoulder as if expecting a blow. He finished his water, returned the cup, and walked on.
By evening, he was in the city speaking to a doctor who owed a favor to the village chairman. By the following morning, the doctor had confirmed what Mama Chidinma already knew. The symptoms described, muscular wasting, cognitive decline, a yellowing of the eyes, were consistent with chronic, low-dose poisoning. A specific toxin, one derived from a plant that grew in the region.
It mimics the symptoms of age and leaves no trace in the body after a few days. This is grave news. We must act swiftly. Call a secret meeting of the elders. We cannot act on suspicion alone. The woman has the church behind her.
If we are wrong, we will be the ones destroyed. We are not wrong. But you are right. We need proof. We need something that cannot be denied.
The old man's will. If she is poisoning him, she expects to inherit. If we can show that he was not of sound mind when the will was made, or better yet, that there is another will. Barrister Okonkwo drew it up himself 5 years ago. Everything goes to the wife. Then we need to speak to Barrister Okonkwo. We need to know if the old man ever expressed doubts. We need to know if he ever asked to change anything.
And we need to get someone inside that compound. Someone who can see what the house girl sees, but who is not afraid to speak. I am an old woman. I have outlived 3 husbands. I am harmless. Who would suspect me? I will go tomorrow. I will tell her I am lonely, that I want to help with the old man, that I want to be useful. She will not refuse an old woman's charity. It would ruin her reputation.
The elders exchanged glances, then nodded, one by one. The next morning, Mama Chidinma appeared at the Nwosu gate with a basket of eggs and a smile that did not reach her eyes.
Ah, Mama Esther, I have brought you eggs from my new hen. She has finally started laying.
Welcome, Afia. Thank you for the eggs. Come, sit down. Perhaps I can sit with your husband for a while. You work so hard, my daughter. You need rest.
Let an old woman be useful.
Mama Chidinma, you are too kind. You do not need to trouble yourself. Mama Chidinma, you are too kind. You do not need to trouble yourself. It is no trouble. What is an old woman with time and no one to spend it on? Please, let me. I will sit with him, read to him, keep him company. You can go about your work without worry.
For a moment, just a moment, Esther's mask slipped. Mama Chidinma saw the calculation behind her eyes, the rapid weighing of risk and reward. To refuse would be suspicious.
To accept meant letting a witness into her domain. But the old woman was harmless, was she not? Half blind, bent with age, a village busybody with no power. What harm could she do?
You are a blessing, truly a blessing from God.
She saw the way he man in his chair. Cut off the man in his chair. A blanket pulled over his child up to his chin. His breath, a shallow whisper. She saw the way he man in his chair. Cut off the man in his chair. A blanket pulled over his child up to his chin. His breath, a shallow whisper.
She sat down beside him, took his cold and beat a hum and oath him. Her fleam was some impossible moment.
She felt his fingers twitch, pressing against hers with the faintest pressure. A signal, a plea. Mama Chidinma did not stop humming.
But her eyes, fixed on Esther's back as the younger woman retreated into the house, hardened into stones.
She would not leave this compound until she had what she came for. And when she had it, the saint of Umweze would learn that there were older powers in this village than her beauty, her money, or her lies. There was memory. There was patience. And there was the slow, unstoppable justice of women who had seen too much to be fooled any longer.
The way the old man, who had been frail but alert 6 months ago, was now a breathing courthouse girl's terror. And this morning's business with the chair, which she had witnessed from her doorway. She watched Esther's routines. The way the young wife would to the Gesta's own hands, never Ifomawa's, emerging with her wrapper retied, her hair damp.
The parade of young men who found reasons to visit, a leaky roof, a faulty car, a Bible study that stretched past midnight. She catalogued it all in her mind, building a case brick by brick. She found nothing. The poison, if it existed, was too well hidden. Noting the way his skin had taken on a waxing. The way his gums were beginning to recede. The way his urine carried a smell that reminded her of the bitter herbs women used to induce miscarriages. On the 5th day, she found the cloth.
It was tucked beneath the cushion of Esther's favorite chair on the veranda, a small piece of white fabric, stained with something that had dried to a pale brown. Mama Chidinma slipped it into her wrapper without a sound. That evening, she gave it to Okafo, who sent it to the city with the same messenger. The doctor's report came back 2 days later. The stain was a concentrated residue of Abris precatorius, the seeds of the rosary pea, a plant whose toxin, when ingested in small doses over time, caused a slow, irreversible failure of the organs. It was a poison known to the old women of the villages.
Astounding, George. It left no trace in the but a woman who had learned the old ways while pretending to be a saint of the new.
On the 8th day, the elders moved. It was a Sunday. Esther had dressed for church in her finest, a flowing gown of ivory lace, a matching hat, pearls at her throat.
Ifioma, watch the old man.
She was preparing to leave, having instructed Ifioma to stay behind and watch the old man, when she opened her front gate and found the path. The path is closed. Behind them, a crowd had begun to gather, drawn by the unusual sight of so many important people assembled at the Nwosu compound on a Sunday morning.
Oga Okafo, Pastor, what a blessing to see you all.
Are you here to escort me to church?
I am honored.
Mama Esther, we are not here for church. We are here to ask you some questions.
Questions? About what? Is something wrong?
The compound will be searched.
By the authority of the village council. You may wait in your sitting room while this is done.
The mask slipped. For one unguarded moment, Esther's face revealed everything, the fury.
Searched? On what grounds? I am the wife of Elder Silas Nwosu. I am a deaconess of this church. You have no right.
The right of a village to protect its own. The right of a dying man to speak when his own voice has been stolen from him. That is the right we have.
You old witch. I welcomed you into my home. I trusted you.
And I found this in your chair, Mama Chima said. Holding up a splash search of the kitchen had uncovered minutes earlier, hidden behind a loose stone in the pantry. It contained pale powder. Tell me, daughter, what is this? Seasoning for your husband's pap?
Nupa is not mine. That girl, Ifioma, she must have put it there. She has been stealing from me, and now she tries to...
Enough. Ifioma will speak. The doctors in the city have already spoken. And your husband...
Your husband will be examined today by a physician from the general hospital. Not a herbalist, not a nurse, a real doctor.
The pearls at her throat rose and fell with her ragged breathing. The crowd had grown larger now. Everyone who had been on their way to church had diverted to witness the spectacle.
He has been poisoned. Chronic, low-dose exposure to a toxin that attacks the nervous system and the internal organs.
He may have weeks, perhaps less. If he had been brought to a hospital 3 months ago, he could have been saved. The sound that rose from the crowd, it was something deeper. A groan, a collective exhale. They had all visited the old man.
They had all praised Esther's devotion.
They had all, in their way, been accomplices. Esther stood in the doorway of her home, her lace gown now crumpled, her hat askew, her face a mask of defiance that could not hide the trembling of her hands.
This is a lie, a conspiracy. That old woman has hated me since the day I married. She is jealous of what I have, of what I built.
You built nothing.
You came here with nothing but your beauty and your lies. You took an old man's money and called it love. You took young men to your bed and called it holiness. And now you have taken his life, spoonful by spoonful.
And called it care. We see you, Esther Nwosu. We have always seen you. We only needed to open our eyes.
The pearls at her throat snapped, scattering across the concrete like small white seeds. The trial was held 3 days later in the village square.
Beneath the great Iroko tree where generations of disputes had been settled. A hair uncovered.
Her face gown replaced simply better worn armor.
The entire village had gathered, not out of thirst for spectacle, but out of a need to understand how such evil had flourished in their midst, under the cover of their own admiration.
Witness after witness came forward. Nandi, the roofer, who confessed to the affair and described the promises Esther had made him about the inheritance. Chibike, the mechanic, who wept as he told of her plans to travel once her husband was gone. Brother Ugo, the preacher, who admitted he had been sent away when he asked too many questions about the old man's illness.
The morning pap, always prepared by Esther's hands, always given to the old man before anyone else could taste it.
The rosary pea toxin mimicked age, killing slowly so that no one would suspect.
Esther said nothing. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, her face on the ground, her face a blank wall. It was only when Barrister Okonkwo took the stand that she looked up.
The lawyer was pale, his usual confidence replaced by a nervous sweating. He explained that he had drawn up Elder Silas's will 5 years ago, leaving everything to Esther. But then he paused, pulling a folded document from his jacket. However, 2 days ago, a messenger arrived at my office with this. It was delivered by a young woman who said she was sent by Mama Chidinma.
It is a codicil to the will, signed by Elder Silas Nwosu 3 months ago, before his condition worsened. I have examined the signature. It is genuine.
Barrister Okonwo unfolded the document and read, I, Silas Nwosu, being of sound mind, do hereby revoke all previous bequests to my wife, Esther Nwosu. In the event of my death, my entire estate shall be held in trust for the following purposes. 1/2 to establish a clinic in Umweze for the treatment of the elderly and infirm. 1/4 to provide scholarships for the daughters of this village, that they may not be sold into marriage to settle debts, and 1/4 to Ifioma, daughter of Okonkwo, for her loyalty and her silence under duress. My wife, Esther Nwosu, shall receive nothing but the clothes she wears and the bed she sleeps in, for she has taken everything else from me already. A silence so deep that the rustle of palm fronds sounded like thunder.
Esther stared at the lawyer, her face draining of color, her mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water.
When did he could not write, he could not speak, he
He could think. And 3 months ago, before you increased the dose, he could still move his hands.
He wrote it in secret. He hid it with a man he trusted, an old friend who brought it to the lawyer's office the day after he died. He knew what you were doing, Esther. He knew, and he prepared.
Esther Nwosu, you have been found guilty of attempted murder, of adultery, of deception against this village and its people.
The white garment you wore has been stripped away. The name they called you, Odoziani, the good wife, is now a curse. You will leave this village. You will not take a single kobo of the Nwosu wealth.
But if you are seen in Umweze again, you will be driven out with stones. The elders have discussed whether to hand you to the police. We have decided against it. Not because you do not deserve the white man's prison, but because we want you to live. We want you to walk through the world on the day that you traded a man's life for a handful of seeds, and you lost.
Esther rose. She did not weep. She did not beg. She looked at the faces around her, the faces that had once smiled at her, praised her, called her blessed, and she saw only strangers.
You odious. And you think you have won.
You have given everything to a girl who will waste it, to a village that will forget that. What do you get from this? What do you gain?
I gain a clear conscience.
You were young, Esther. You were beautiful. You could have married any man, built any life. Instead, you chose to become a poison. That is your inheritance now. That is all you take with you.
Esther left Umweze that evening, walking down the red dirt road with nothing but the wrapper on her back and a small bag of clothes that Ifeoma had packed for her. More mercy than she deserved, the village murmured. The sun set behind her, painting the sky in shades of orange and blood, and the shadows of the palms stretched across her path like fingers pointing away. She walked to the city, to a life she had not planned for.
A life of small rooms and mean streets, of work that chafed her soft hands, of loneliness that no young man's arms could fill. She heard, helpless later,
She heard that the clinic had been built, and the scholarships had been given, and that Ifeoma had become a teacher. Something she had traded, and a handful of promises.
The village of Umweze did not speak her name again. They built their clinic, they educated their daughters, they learned to look more closely at the saints in their midst. They did not speak of Esther. They did not need to. Her story had become the warning, the shadow that made the light of their new village shine brighter.
And in the end, that was her only legacy. Not wealth, not freedom, not the arms of young men, but a silence that spoke louder of her prayers ever had.